When the most powerful governments on earth put a price on someone's head, that person should be caught. The full weight of the FBI, DEA, Mexican military, and billions in resources should make escape impossible. Justice should be inevitable.
But for the people who lost family members to cartel violence, for the communities terrorized by endless bloodshed, the greatest failure didn't come from lack of trying. It came from two men who turned the entire system into a joke.
Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán and Nemesio El Mencho Oseguera weren't hiding in caves. They were running billion-dollar empires while their faces stared out from wanted posters. These weren't lucky escapes. These were systematic evasions built on corruption reaching the presidency, security rivaling military installations, and violence so extreme that police forces refused to operate in their territories. They made governments afraid to try. And the courts made sure that when El Chapo was finally caught, he would never see freedom again. Life plus 30 years in a concrete tomb. Today, we're breaking down El Mencho versus El Chapo, and who was harder to catch. What you're about to hear will destroy any belief that money can't buy invisibility. You'll see how two men turned billions into shields that kept them free for decades. And you'll learn that the only way to catch a ghost is to wait for the one human mistake technology can't protect. Section 1. The same dirt, different paths. Joaquín Archibaldo Guzmán Loera was born on April 4, 1957, in La Tuna, Badiraguato, Sinaloa. The hamlet had no electricity, no running water. You could only reach it by mule, climbing narrow dirt paths through the Sierra Madre Mountains. His father, Emilio Guzmán Bustillos, grew opium poppies on land so poor that subsistence farming barely kept the family fed. Joaquín dropped out of school after 3rd grade. He sold oranges as a child. His father beat him regularly. By the time he was a teenager, his father kicked him out of the house entirely. At 15 years old, Joaquín was cultivating marijuana with his cousins, the Beltran Leyva brothers. They would later become his allies, then his mortal enemies. He was short for his age, stocky, with a round face that earned him the nickname everyone would remember: El Chapo. Shorty. He proved himself fast, reliable. He could move cocaine from arrival points in Mexico to Los Angeles in 24 hours. They started calling him El Rápido, the fast one. Nemesio Rubén Oseguera Cervantes entered the world 9 years later, on July 17, 1966, in Aguililla, Michoacán, another mountain town. Another place where poverty crushed families into dirt. He had 5 brothers. He dropped out in 5th grade to work the avocado and lime fields. By 14, he was guarding marijuana plantations in the hills. His nickname, El Mencho, was just a diminutive of Nemesio. Simple, forgettable. Exactly the way he wanted it. But El Mencho's path diverged from El Chapo's in a way that would matter decades later. In the early 1980s, while still a teenager, he crossed illegally into the United States. He settled in the San Francisco Bay Area. He worked. He learned. And in 1992, federal agents arrested him for conspiracy to distribute heroin. He was sentenced to 5 years in a Texas prison and served approximately 3 years. He learned how American law enforcement operated. He learned their methods, their weaknesses. When he was deported in the mid-1990s, he came back to Mexico with knowledge El Chapo never had. El Chapo rose through the Guadalajara cartel under Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, the godfather who controlled Mexico's entire drug trade in the 1980s. El Chapo worked as a logistics coordinator. He smuggled cocaine. He proved himself ruthless and efficient. When the government arrested Félix Gallardo on April 8, 1989, the old man called a meeting in Acapulco. He divided the territories among his lieutenants. El Chapo got the Pacific Coast Corridor, alongside Héctor Luis Palma Salazar, and later Ismael El Mayo Zambada Garcia. He built what became the Sinaloa cartel. At its peak, it controlled 40 to 60% of Mexico's drug trade. Annual revenues reached approximately $3 billion. El Mencho's climb was slower, quieter. After deportation, he briefly worked as a municipal police officer in Jalisco. He learned how police departments operated from the inside. Then he joined the Milenio cartel as a hitman, protecting leader Armando Valencia Cornelio. In 1996, he married Rosalinda González Valencia. Her family controlled the Milenio cartel's financial operations through an organization called Los Queenies. That marriage was the power move that changed everything. Between 2003 and 2010, Mexican and American authorities systematically arrested or killed the Milenio cartel's leadership. On July 29, 2010, the army killed Sinaloa cartel lieutenant Ignacio Nacho Coronel in a shootout. The power vacuum was complete. El Mencho reorganized the remnants. He called the new organization Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG. At first, they operated under the name Mata Zetas, Zeta Killers. They wanted everyone to know exactly what they were planning to do. On September 20th, 2011, CJNG operatives dumped 35 bound, tortured bodies from pickup trucks onto a busy boulevard in Boca del Rio, Veracruz. Evening rush hour. Families driving home from work. A banner draped across the corpses read, "This is going to happen to all the Zeta shits who continue to operate in Veracruz. This territory has a new proprietor." Over 90 additional bodies appeared in the following weeks. By 2012, CJNG had expanded coast to coast, one of the fastest territorial expansions in cartel history. El Mencho had built his empire not by avoiding violence, but by making it so extreme that entire organizations surrendered rather than fight. The two men came from the same poverty, the same mountains, the same world where selling drugs was the only path out of generational misery. But they approached power differently. El Chapo wanted people to know his name. He wanted corridos sung about him. He wanted to be feared and admired. El Mencho wanted to be invisible, a name without a face, a voice on a recording that police commanders obeyed without ever seeing who was giving the orders. And that difference, more than anything else, would determine who was harder to catch. Section 2. Caught 3 times. On May 24, 1993, Cardinal Juan Jesus Posadas Ocampo stepped out of his white Mercury Grand Marquis at Guadalajara International Airport. He was Mexico's second highest Catholic official, 67 years old, tall, heavy-set, gray hair. He was impossible to confuse with anyone else. Gunmen opened fire at close range. 14 bullets struck the cardinal. 52 rounds hit his vehicle. The government claimed Tijuana cartel hitmen mistook him for El Chapo. The church rejected that explanation immediately. How do you mistake a prelate in religious vestments for a short, stocky drug trafficker? A declassified 1993 FBI report supported the mistaken identity theory. The case remains officially unsolved. But the public outcry forced El Chapo to run. On June 9, 1993, Guatemalan soldiers arrested him near Tapachula. He was extradited to Mexico and sentenced to 20 years and 9 months at Puente Grande Federal Prison in Jalisco. He didn't fight the system. He purchased it. Over the next 8 years, he bribed guards, the prison security chief, and dozens of officials. 78 people were ultimately implicated in his corruption network. The costs included a key payment of approximately $2.5 million, plus numerous smaller bribes to various individuals. He ran the Sinaloa cartel from his cell. He ordered custom meals. He received prostitutes. He used cell phones freely. He expanded into methamphetamine trafficking. Prison became a luxury hotel where he conducted business while the government pretended he was locked away. His first escape on January 19, 2001 became legend. The exact method remains disputed. The most widely reported version holds that guard Francisco Javier Camberos Rivera opened his electronically secured cell door. El Chapo hid in a laundry cart. Guards rolled him through multiple security checkpoints to the parking lot. He fled in the trunk of a Chevrolet Monte Carlo. Journalist Annabel Hernandez argues he walked out dressed in a guard's uniform during a security drill. Trial testimony from Vicente Zambada Niebla supported the laundry cart version. What nobody disputes: security cameras were disabled, guards were paid to look away, and Jalisco police were bribed to delay the manhunt by 24 hours. El Chapo spent 13 years and 1 month as a fugitive. He operated from safe houses across Sinaloa, connected by tunnels to the city's drainage system. His security was sophisticated for its era. Encrypted BlackBerry phones routed through intermediaries using public Wi-Fi. Radio frequency scanners, armed bodyguards. His stronghold in the Sierra Madre, the Golden Triangle, where Sinaloa, Durango, and Chihuahua converge, was accessible only by single-track dirt roads. Locals could detect approaching outsiders from miles away. He funded roads, schools, and churches in mountain communities. Narco corridos celebrated his exploits. People in Badiraguato said after his conviction, "He helped a lot of people. People here will suffer now." His second capture on February 22, 2014, in Mazatlan exposed his fatal weakness. He couldn't stop communicating. DEA agent Andrew Hogan and U.S. Marshals spent months dismantling his encrypted phone network after associate arrests yielded crucial devices. They traced a BlackBerry signal from his bodyguard to apartment 401 of the Hotel Miramar, a beachfront condominium complex. At 6:40 in the morning, approximately 40 Mexican Marines found El Chapo sleeping with his wife, Emma Coronel Aispuro, their twin baby daughters, a chef, and a nanny. No shots were fired. Days earlier, he had escaped a Culiacan raid through tunnels beneath bathtubs connecting 6 safe houses. But his decision to visit his daughters in a predictable location proved fatal. His second escape on July 11, 2015, from Altiplano Maximum Security Prison was an engineering marvel. A tunnel stretching 1.5 kilometers ran from a 50-centimeter square opening in his shower floor to a half-built house outside the prison compound. The tunnel was 1.7 meters tall, approximately El Chapo's own height. Lit with PVC piped ventilation, equipped with a modified motorcycle on rails, a GPS-enabled smartwatch smuggled into prison provided his cell's exact coordinates for tunnel alignment. Planning began immediately after his 2014 capture. His wife, Emma Coronel, orchestrated it alongside former prison security chief Damaso Lopez and El Chapo's sons. The physical construction cost an estimated $5 million. An estimated 350 truckloads of excavated dirt were removed without detection. Security cameras last showed El Chapo at 8:52 in the evening near his shower. Guards noticed his absence 18 to 25 minutes later. His third and final capture on January 8, 2016 in Los Mochis, Sinaloa, involved a pre-dawn marine raid that killed 5 of his associates. El Chapo and security chief Ivan Gastelum Cruz fled through another tunnel beneath a bathtub leading to the city's sewer system. They were apprehended hours later on a highway in a commandeered vehicle. The critical intelligence trail led back to a meeting El Chapo held with actor Sean Penn and Mexican actress Kate Del Castillo in October 2015 in the Sierra Madre Mountains of Durango. They wanted to discuss a biopic. Mexican intelligence agents photographed the visitors throughout. The communications surrounding the meeting helped authorities triangulate El Chapo's position. Penn's Rolling Stone article, in which El Chapo stated, "I supply more heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, and marijuana than anybody else in the world," was published the day after the arrest. Attorney General Arely Gomez called the Penn meeting essential to the capture. El Chapo sits in a 12 by 7-foot cell at ADX Florence in Colorado, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. All furniture is poured concrete. A 4-inch window. 24-hour audio and visual surveillance monitored by both the Bureau of Prisons and FBI. He is subject to special administrative measures, the most restrictive communication controls in the federal system, limiting contact to attorneys and 1 or 2 family members. He spends 23 hours per day in his cell. His only neighbor is James Sabatino, an alleged Gambino crime family con artist. They communicate by shouting through doors. In letters obtained by Millenio in 2023 and 2024, El Chapo described his conditions as a sinister and dehumanizing environment. He complained of severe sinus pain, sleep deprivation from hot air blown into his cell, and warned the isolation would cause a heart attack or drive him insane. No one has ever escaped from ADX Florence since it opened in 1994. El Chapo was caught 3 times. He will never be caught again, because he will never be free again. Before we move on to the next section, make sure to subscribe if you're finding these stories as disturbing as I am.
It helps us keep covering the cases that most channels won't touch.
While El Chapo's 3 captures proved he could be found, tracked, and imprisoned, the next man built a fortress so dangerous that approaching him was a near-suicidal proposition for law enforcement. Section 3. The paramilitary fortress, where El Chapo relied on tunnels and bribes, El Mencho constructed something qualitatively different. A military-grade defense perimeter that raised the cost of pursuit to levels the Mexican state was often unwilling to pay. CJNG announced itself to the nation with deliberate spectacle. On September 20th, 2011, operatives dumped 35 bound, tortured bodies from pickup trucks onto a busy boulevard in Boca del Rio, Veracruz. Evening rush hour. Families driving home from work. A banner draped across the corpses read, "This is going to happen to all the Zeta shits who continue to operate in Veracruz. This territory has a new proprietor." Over 90 additional bodies appeared in the following weeks. By 2012, CJNG had expanded coast to coast within 6 months, one of the fastest territorial expansions in cartel history. The defining moment of El Mencho's evasion came on May 1st, 2015. Intelligence indicated El Mencho was near Villa Purificación, Jalisco. The government launched Operation Jalisco. Before dawn, a CJNG convoy drove with headlights off to intercept the approaching military force. As 4 helicopters conducted surveillance, CJNG fighters opened fire with a Russian-made RPG-27 rocket launcher. The weapon struck a Cougar EC-725 helicopter carrying 18 passengers. The aircraft spun and crashed. 9 soldiers and police officers died. The first time an organized crime group had shot down a military helicopter in the Mexican drug war. Simultaneously, CJNG launched 39 roadblocks across Jalisco and 4 adjacent states. They hijacked and burned buses, trucks, and cars to prevent reinforcements. 5 gas stations were torched. The roadblocks stretched for miles in every direction. Civilian vehicles were pulled over, the occupants forced out at gunpoint, and the cars set ablaze in the middle of highways. No emergency vehicles could pass. No military convoys could advance. The entire state was paralyzed while El Mencho disappeared into the mountains. The government responded by deploying 10,000 troops and 300 armored vehicles to Jalisco. Checkpoints appeared on every major road. Helicopters circled constantly. Intelligence units monitored every communication channel. It achieved nothing. El Mencho remained at large. His security apparatus, revealed in detail after his February 2026 death, was staggering in scope. According to a Los Angeles Times investigation, based on sources familiar with his operations, approximately 400 gunmen controlled every route to his main compound in concentric circles of protection. Landmines lined approach routes for miles. Personnel in each ring only knew the layout of mines in their own zone, not where the next ring began. This meant that even if authorities captured members of the outer security ring, those men couldn't reveal the safe paths through the inner defenses. Each layer operated independently. Each layer knew only what it needed to know. He employed a bank of young computer hackers to infiltrate Mexican military mainframes and monitor government intelligence in real time. When authorities planned an operation, El Mencho often knew about it before the officers on the ground received their orders. Counter-drone radar scramblers defeated aerial surveillance. He rarely allowed a phone near him, fearing GPS tracking. When communication was absolutely necessary, others handled the devices at a distance from his location. His organization operated a dedicated drone unit, the Operadores Droneros, that pioneered weaponized drone warfare in the cartel conflict. Explosive-laden quadcopters, FPV kamikaze drones. Drone attacks attributed to CJNG surged from 5 incidents in 2020 to 260 in the first half of 2023 alone. The violence El Mencho wielded as a deterrent was qualitatively different from El Chapo's business-focused approach. On June 26, 2020, at approximately 6:35 in the morning, CJNG operatives ambushed Mexico City's Secretary of Public Security, Omar Garcia Harfuch, on Paseo de la Reforma, one of the capital's most prestigious avenues. 28 gunmen, organized in 4 groups of 7, hired 3 weeks prior, opened fire from a public works truck using 50-caliber Barrett rifles and assault weapons. The attack happened in broad daylight in one of the most heavily policed areas of Mexico City. The gunmen didn't care. They opened fire with weapons designed to penetrate armored vehicles. Authorities later seized 34 long arms, 8 handguns, 7 fragmentation grenades, 5 Barrett rifles, 51 Molotov cocktails, and approximately 400 spent shell casings at the scene. 400 rounds fired in the middle of Mexico's capital. 2 of Garcia Harfuch's bodyguards were killed. 1 female bystander was killed. Garcia Harfuch survived with 3 bullet wounds and multiple shrapnel injuries. The message was unmistakable. Pursue El Mencho, and this is what happens. It doesn't matter if you're the highest-ranking security official in the country. It doesn't matter if you're in the capital. It doesn't matter if you're surrounded by police. We can reach you. A DEA agent described CJNG's methods to Rolling Stone as ISIS stuff. The manner in which they kill people, the sheer numbers. It's unparalleled even in Mexico. Other attacks reinforced the deterrent. In April 2015, 15 Jalisco State Police were killed in a Mountain Road ambush, one of the deadliest single attacks on security forces in the drug war. The officers were traveling in convoy when CJNG gunmen opened fire from elevated positions on both sides of the road. The police never had a chance to return fire effectively. In December 2020, former Jalisco Governor Aristoteles Sandoval was allegedly killed by CJNG in a Puerto Vallarta restaurant bathroom. A former governor, shot to death while eating dinner. Federal Judge Uriel Villegas Ortiz and his wife were executed in Colima in June 2020 after issuing judgments in CJNG cases. In August 2019, 19 mutilated corpses appeared in Uruapan, Michoacan. 9 hung semi-naked from a bridge with a banner signed CJNG. A leaked audio recording captured El Mencho directly threatening a police commander. "Look here, you son of a bitch, it's Mencho. Get your fucking men to fall back, or I'm going to fuck you up and your whole squad. I have 30 of you fucking located and identified." The officer's reply was immediate submission. "You got it, sir. I'll tell the police squads to fall back." El Mencho then referenced his corruption network. "Because all of you happily accept my money." The recording revealed something crucial about El Mencho's evasion strategy. He wasn't just hiding from law enforcement. He was actively controlling it. Police units received their orders from him, not from their commanders. Officers who took his money did what he told them to do. Officers who didn't take his money knew what happened to judges and governors who got in his way. This wasn't evasion through hiding. This was evasion through making the cost of capture so high that entire police forces chose not to try. El Mencho didn't run from the government. He made the government afraid to approach. Section 4. Discipline versus hubris. The contrast between the two men's operational security reveals what made El Mencho harder to locate. El Chapo was a micromanager who couldn't stop communicating. He hired a Colombian IT specialist named Christian Rodriguez to build an encrypted BlackBerry network of approximately 100 devices. Then he used it to obsessively discuss drug trafficking operations. Every shipment, every payment, every problem with every lieutenant in every territory. Author Alan Feuer noted in his book that El Chapo never shut up about drug trafficking. He just loved it. He was a micromanager. The FBI turned Rodriguez as an informant in 2010 and 2011, gaining access to over 800 intercepted calls. Approximately 200 featured El Chapo's voice. He talked about cocaine loads coming through Guatemala. He talked about methamphetamine production in the mountains. He talked about corrupt officials and which ones needed more money. He talked about rivals who needed to be killed. Every conversation was evidence. Every phone call was another thread investigators could pull. He also installed FlexiSpy spyware on phones given to his wife, mistresses, and associates. He wanted to know everything they were doing, everyone they were talking to, everywhere they were going. When that surveillance architecture was compromised, it exposed his entire network. The phones he used to spy on others became the phones authorities used to find him. El Chapo's vanity compounded his vulnerability. He appeared on the Forbes billionaire list from 2009 to 2012, ranked as high as number 701 with an estimated net worth of $1 billion. Most drug traffickers would do anything to stay off that list. El Chapo seemed proud to be on it. He married beauty queen Emma Coronel in a 2007 Durango ceremony that authorities raided a day too late. The wedding was public, lavish. Everyone knew where it was happening. He commissioned a biopic through Kate Del Castillo while on the run. He wanted his story told. He wanted to be famous. Former DEA agent Mike Bodner summarized the contrast. El Chapo liked to live the flashy lifestyle. The cars, women, nice restaurants, alcohol. El Mencho is content to stay away from that stuff, to work out, to eat right, to stay off the radar. El Mencho was a ghost. Only a handful of photographs of him existed throughout his entire career. The DEA and FBI reward posters used undated images. One showed a sharp face with thin mustache. Another showed a rough 1989 profile shot. Both were decades old by the time the bounty reached $15 million. He never gave a single interview. Not to journalists, not to documentary filmmakers, not to anyone. He never appeared on any wealth list. He never met with celebrities. He never commissioned corridos about himself. His anonymity was so complete that Al Jazeera described him as having cultivated an air of mystery throughout the country, keeping such a low profile that all known photographs of him were decades old. His only known public appearances came in 2025, when he briefly appeared on screen at 2 music concerts. 2 brief appearances in 16 years. That was it. CJNG's organizational structure reflected this discipline. Operating as a franchise model, described by analysts as similar to McDonald's, affiliated local organizations operated semi-autonomously. The cartel was less dependent on a single leader than the Sinaloa cartel was on El Chapo. El Mencho's inner organization included specialized units: Grupo Elite for enforcement, Fuerzas Especiales Mencho for personal protection, dedicated drone operators, regional commands. The DEA described tens of thousands of members, associates, and facilitators across 40-plus countries, a significantly broader international footprint than El Chapo's network. If El Mencho disappeared, the organization wouldn't collapse. It would keep operating. The technological gap between eras further advantaged El Mencho. El Chapo operated in the age of encrypted phones and physical tunnels from 2001 to 2016. El Mencho operated in the age of armed drones, AI-assisted operations, cryptocurrency laundering, and cyber warfare from 2010 to 2026. CJNG adapted tactics from global conflicts. FPV kamikaze drones drawn from Ukraine-era innovation. IEDs mimicking insurgency tactics. Social media recruitment via TikTok, controlling over 50% of cartel-linked TikTok accounts. The cartel manufactured its own AR-15 and M16 variants in clandestine workshops. They deployed armored vehicles, narco tanks, with steel plating, machine guns, and ramming bars welded to the front. El Chapo changed phones daily, used radio scanners, built steel-reinforced doors into his safe houses, but he couldn't stop himself from communicating with his wife, his mistresses, his lieutenants, his business partners. Every call was a thread investigators could pull. Every text message was a breadcrumb leading closer. He needed people to know he was still in charge. He needed to micromanage. That need became his weakness. El Mencho moved locations constantly, never stayed in one place for more than 24 hours, kept phones away from his person, used hackers to monitor who was monitoring him, built physical barriers, landmines, and armed guards that made approach nearly impossible even when his location was known. He learned from El Chapo's mistakes. No interviews, no Forbes lists, no vanity, no meetings with celebrities, just silence and violence. The difference wasn't intelligence. Both men were strategic thinkers who built billion-dollar empires from nothing. The difference was discipline. El Chapo loved being El Chapo. He loved the fame. He loved people knowing his name. He loved the corridos and the legend. El Mencho was content being no one, a name without a face, a threat without a biography. And in the world of fugitives, anonymity is armor that money can't buy. Before we move on to the next section, make sure to subscribe if you're finding these stories as disturbing as I am. It helps us keep covering the cases that most channels won't touch. While both men built their defenses on corruption and violence, one purchased the Mexican presidency and the other infiltrated the entire security apparatus from within. Section 5. The Corruption Networks. Both men wielded corruption as a primary defense tool, but at different scales and with different consequences. El Chapo's corruption reached the highest levels of the Mexican government. The most explosive trial revelation came from Colombian trafficker Alex Cifuentes Villa, who testified that El Chapo told him he paid a $100 million bribe to President-elect Enrique Peña Nieto in October 2012. Cifuentes said Peña Nieto initially requested $250 million. El Chapo negotiated it down to $100 million. The allegation was introduced by defense attorney Jeffrey Lichtman during the January 2019 trial. Cifuentes later admitted his account shifted between debriefings, with different versions and different details emerging over time. The claim was based on what Cifuentes said El Chapo told him, making it second-hand hearsay. The trial judge had previously admonished the defense about introducing inadmissible hearsay. Peña Nieto's former chief of staff called the claims false, defamatory, and absurd, noting the Peña Nieto government was the one that located, arrested, and extradited El Chapo. The allegation remains unproven. Whether the $100 million bribe actually happened remains unverified. But what is documented, what was proven in court, reveals corruption just as devastating. Genaro Garcia Luna served as Mexico's Secretary of Public Security from 2006 to 2012, the nation's top law enforcement official, the man personally responsible for catching drug traffickers. For 6 years, he was the face of Mexico's war on drugs. He stood beside presidents. He gave press conferences about major arrests. He promised the Mexican people that their government was winning the fight against the cartels. The entire time, he was on the Sinaloa cartel's payroll. Garcia Luna was convicted in Brooklyn in February 2023 of accepting millions in Sinaloa cartel bribes. In October 2024, he was sentenced to 38 years and 4 months in prison. Witness Jesus Zambada testified to delivering at least $6 million to Garcia Luna in 2 briefcase payments. Cash in briefcases, handed directly to the man running Mexico's federal police. This meant El Chapo had protection from the official personally responsible for catching him for over a decade. The man hunting him was working for him. Think about what that means. Every operation Garcia Luna planned, the Sinaloa cartel knew about in advance. Every informant who came forward, their information went directly to the people they were informing on. Every tactical plan, every surveillance operation, every arrest strategy was compromised before it began. Garcia Luna didn't just take bribes and look the other way. He actively used his position to protect the cartel, to warn them, to sabotage investigations, to arrest their rivals while leaving Sinaloa's operations untouched. The conviction of Garcia Luna proved what everyone in Mexico already suspected. The corruption wasn't a few cops taking money to ignore street dealers. The corruption went all the way to the top. The people claiming to fight the cartels were the cartels. El Mencho's corruption was more diffuse, but equally effective. Rather than purchasing individual presidents, he infiltrated the security apparatus systemically. A Jalisco-based federal magistrate, Isidro Avelar Gutierrez, was dismissed in February 2023 for CJNG ties. Multiple local officials were arrested for collusion, including the mayor of Tequila Municipality in February 2026. The leaked audio recording demonstrated that entire police units operated under his direction. Officers didn't just take bribes, they took orders. CJNG's consistent ability to learn of operations in advance, the pattern of arriving at recently abandoned safe houses, strongly suggests ongoing intelligence leaks within Mexican security forces. The exact numbers of compromised officials are difficult to verify, but the pattern is clear. When authorities planned a raid, El Mencho knew. When they set up checkpoints, he knew. When they deployed troops, he knew. Someone inside the system was always feeding him information. The difference between El Chapo's corruption and El Mencho's corruption reflects their different approaches to everything. El Chapo bought individuals at the highest levels. Big payments to big people. Garcia Luna, allegedly the president. Concentrated corruption that made for spectacular headlines when it was exposed. El Mencho bought systems, hundreds of smaller officials, police commanders, local mayors, federal magistrates, prison guards, military officers. A web of corruption so extensive that even when pieces of it were exposed, the rest kept functioning. Both strategies worked. Both men evaded capture for over a decade, despite being the most wanted criminals in their country. But El Mencho's approach was harder to dismantle because there was no single point of failure. You could arrest one corrupt magistrate, and 10 more remained in place. You could expose one leak, and 5 others kept feeding information. The corruption wasn't a deal between 2 people. It was infrastructure. And that infrastructure, combined with the violence CJNG was willing to inflict on anyone who refused to cooperate, made pursuing El Mencho a career-ending or life-ending decision for Mexican officials. Take the money and live. Refuse the money and risk what happened to judges, governors, and police commanders who thought they were untouchable. It wasn't a choice most people were willing to make. The corruption networks both men built didn't just help them evade capture, they made capture nearly impossible without help from outside Mexico. El Chapo was only caught when American intelligence and DEA resources were fully committed to dismantling his communication networks. El Mencho was only located when the CIA and FBI provided his exact position to Mexican special forces. The Mexican government couldn't catch them alone. Not because Mexican authorities lacked capability, because too many Mexican authorities were working for the targets. Section 6, February 22, 2026. El Mencho's death came through a vulnerability he shared with El Chapo, despite all his precautions. A romantic partner. On February 20th, 2026, Mexican military intelligence tracked a trusted associate of one of El Mencho's romantic partners, as the associate transported her to Tapalpa, Jalisco, a mountain town outside Guadalajara. The CIA and FBI provided El Mencho's precise location to Mexican military intelligence. A U.S. Predator surveillance drone flew at 20,000 feet over Colima, Nayarit, and Jalisco, gathering intelligence in the days before the raid. The same technology that tracked terrorists in the Middle East was now circling the skies over Mexico, watching a single compound in the mountains. Special forces approached by helicopter. El Mencho's compound, Cabañas La Loma, consisted of 7 luxury cabins on a steep hillside with only one narrow, bumpy access road. The kind of location that made vehicle approach impossible without being detected from miles away. But helicopters changed that equation. They came in fast and low. An hours-long gun battle ensued. El Mencho fled into the wooded cabin complex. His 400 gunmen weren't there. His concentric rings of security weren't there. His landmines didn't help. The one thing that had kept him safe for 16 years, his constant movement and his fortress of armed men, had failed because he stayed in one place long enough to be found. He was wounded in the fighting, multiple bullet wounds to the chest, abdomen, and legs. He was found alongside 2 bodyguards. All 3 were extracted by a helicopter for medical evacuation to Mexico City. El Mencho died from his wounds during the airlift. 16 years of evasion ended in a helicopter above the same mountains where he built his empire. His right-hand man, known as El Tuli, was killed the same day in a separate operation in El Grullo. Coordinated strikes. The kind of operation that required perfect intelligence and perfect timing. The kind of operation that only worked because someone, somewhere, had told the Americans exactly where to look. The compound revealed details that complicated El Mencho's image of austere discipline. Authorities found Christian Dior clothing, exotic animal trophies, including a zebra head mounted on the wall, medical supplies for kidney disease treatment, religious items. The man who presented himself as invisible, who avoided all luxury and attention, had been living in decorated cabins surrounded by trophies. The man who built his reputation on discipline had late-stage kidney disease requiring daily dialysis treatments. That condition, more than anything else, had restricted his mobility in his final months. Security analyst David Salcedo confirmed El Mencho had been suffering from kidney disease and needed to rest regularly after dialysis treatments. A medical center had reportedly been built for him in the village of El Alcihuatal in rural Jalisco. The treatments kept him alive. They also kept him in predictable locations long enough to be tracked. The body that had carried him through 16 years as a fugitive had become the weakness that finally made him findable. The aftermath proved everything security analysts had warned about. CJNG launched retaliatory violence across approximately 20 Mexican states. At least 25 National Guard members were killed in 6 separate attacks within hours of the announcement. Over 250 roadblocks were erected across the country. Highways were shut down. Flights to Guadalajara and Puerto Vallarta were canceled. The government warned citizens to stay indoors. More than 70 people died in the operation and its aftermath. El Mencho was buried on March 2, 2026, in a golden casket at Recinto de Paz Cemetery in Zapopan. Hundreds attended. Mariachi bands played. The man who had lived in shadows for 16 years was buried with the kind of spectacle he had avoided his entire career. In death, he became visible in a way he never allowed himself to be in life. The violence didn't stop with his burial. CJNG didn't collapse. The franchise model he built continued operating. Regional commanders took control of their territories. The drone units kept flying.
The corruption networks kept functioning. The organization he created was designed to survive without him. And it did. Exactly 11 days before this script was written, the most wanted man in Mexico died in a helicopter. The man who shot down a military helicopter was killed while being evacuated in one. The man who built landmines and fortresses and corruption networks that reached every level of government was finally caught because his kidneys failed and he needed medical treatment in a place the CIA could track. All the technology, all the violence, all the discipline, all the money. None of it could protect him from his own body giving out. Before we move on to the next section, make sure to subscribe if you're finding these stories as disturbing as I am.
It helps us keep covering the cases that most channels won't touch.
While El Mencho died 11 days ago and El Chapo sits in a concrete tomb in Colorado, the question remains whether catching either of them actually changed anything about the drug war they helped create.
Section 7. The numbers that define harder. The quantitative comparison favors El Mencho on nearly every metric that matters. He evaded capture for approximately 16 years, from CJNG's formation around 2010 to his death in 2026. El Chapo evaded capture for a combined 13.5 years as a fugitive across 3 separate periods. 13 years after his first escape, 1 year after his second escape. El Mencho was never captured alive. His 3 times caught counterpart was arguably too easy to catch. The U.S. bounty on El Mencho reached $15 million in December 2024, triple the $5 million on El Chapo at the time of his captures. $15 million made El Mencho the most valuable fugitive in the history of American drug enforcement. Mexico's bounty reached 300 million pesos. Combined, the rewards for information leading to his capture or death exceeded any amount ever offered for a criminal target. It didn't matter. Nobody collected. The deployment of 10,000 troops after the 2015 helicopter shootdown dwarfed any operation against El Chapo. 10,000 soldiers, 300 armored vehicles, helicopters circling constantly, checkpoints on every road, intelligence units monitoring every signal. It achieved nothing. El Mencho remained free for another 11 years after that operation. CJNG's February 2025 designation as a foreign terrorist organization, an FTO classification, reflected the extraordinary threat El Mencho represented. The designation placed CJNG in the same category as ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Hezbollah, organizations that threaten national security, organizations that use terrorism as a primary tactic. The U.S. government made it clear that CJNG wasn't just a drug trafficking organization.
It was a terrorist organization that happened to traffic drugs. The claim of 50-plus failed capture attempts against El Mencho could not be independently verified from credible sources, but major documented evasion incidents tell the story clearly enough. The August 2012 Guadalajara operation, where CJNG burned 37 vehicles to cover his escape. The March 2015 Ocotlan ambush, where 5 police were killed protecting El Mencho during a meeting. The May 2015 Operation Jalisco, where a helicopter was downed and 9 died. Multiple undocumented near misses at safe houses, where authorities arrived minutes too late. Against El Chapo, approximately 5 to 6 major failed operations are documented before his final captures. A 2006 SUV sighting in Durango, the 2007 wedding raid that arrived 1 day late, a 2012 Los Cabos mansion escaped through a tunnel, the February 2014 Culiacan raid, where he fled through 6 connected safe houses. Each time, he slipped away. But each time, authorities got closer. The pattern showed a man who could be tracked, who could be cornered, who made mistakes that left trails.
Several figures cited in popular accounts require correction based on research.
El Chapo's prison bribes are sometimes reported as $2.5 million monthly.
The actual verified figure is $2.5 million as a key payment for the entire 2001 escape operation, though additional smaller bribes were paid to various individuals. His cartel's peak revenue is consistently cited at approximately $3 billion annually by Forbes and expert estimates. The $4 billion figure lacks credible sourcing. The Altiplano escape tunnel's cost was approximately $5 million for construction. The $50 million figure frequently cited likely includes all bribes to prison officials, not just the tunnel itself.
CJNG operates in 21 to 23 Mexican states, with allies in all 32,
not the frequently cited 28 of 32. CJNG's international presence spans 40-plus countries per the DEA, higher than the commonly cited 35-plus. The May 2015 helicopter attack killed 9 soldiers and police, not 15. The 15 figure appears to conflate a separate April 6th ambush that killed 15 state police in a mountain road attack. The numbers matter because they reveal something fundamental about the difference between these two men.
El Chapo was caught 3 times.
Each capture involved sophisticated intelligence work, extensive surveillance, and careful coordination between Mexican and American authorities. But he was catchable. El Mencho required a foreign terrorist organization designation, $15 million in rewards, constant predator drone surveillance, and direct CIA involvement just to locate him once. And even then, he wasn't captured. He was killed.
El Chapo escaped from 2 maximum security prisons.
El Mencho was never inside one. El Chapo's escapes were engineering marvels. El Mencho's entire 16-year run was an exercise in never being caught in the first place.
El Chapo built tunnels under his safe houses. El Mencho built fortresses that made approaching his safe houses suicidal.
The body count tells part of the story. The Garcia Harfuch assassination attempt. 400 shell casings. The May 2015 helicopter shootdown. 9 dead. The April 2015 mountain ambush. 15 dead. The February 2026 raid and aftermath. 70 dead. CJNG didn't just evade law enforcement. They attacked it with military-grade weapons and tactics that made authorities reconsider whether pursuing El Mencho was worth the cost. By every metric that matters, duration as a fugitive, resources required to pursue, violence of resistance, and the fact that he died free rather than in handcuffs, El Mencho was harder to catch. The numbers don't lie. One man was caught 3 times.
The other was never caught at all.
Section 8. The Kingpin Paradox. El Chapo's extradition on January 19, 2017, flown from Ciudad Juarez to Long Island MacArthur Airport on the eve of Trump's inauguration, led to the most spectacular drug trial in American history. Over 12 weeks in Brooklyn Federal Court before Judge Brian M. Cogan, 56 witnesses testified. 14 were cooperating witnesses. Former associates, former partners, men who had worked alongside El Chapo for years and then turned against him to save themselves. Pedro and Margarito Flores, Chicago-based twin brothers who were Sinaloa cartel distributors, testified they imported 38 tons of cocaine and sent $800 million in cash to the cartel. 38 tons. $800 million. Numbers so large they stopped sounding real. On February 12, 2019, a jury of 8 women and 4 men found El Chapo guilty on all 10 counts. The continuing criminal enterprise charge, the Kingpin statute, carried mandatory life imprisonment. On July 17, 2019, Judge Cogan sentenced him to life plus 30 years and ordered forfeiture of $12.6 billion. A conservative estimate of lifetime trafficking proceeds. El Chapo arrived at ADX Florence, the federal supermax in Florence, Colorado, on July 19, 2019. The Alcatraz of the Rockies. He occupies a 12 by 7-foot cell in a special wing called the Suites. All furniture made of poured concrete, a 4-inch window, 24-hour audio and visual surveillance monitored by both the Bureau of Prisons and FBI. He is subject to Special Administrative Measures, SAMs, the most restrictive communication controls in the federal system. He spends 23 hours per day in his cell. No one has ever escaped from ADX Florence since it opened in 1994. The Mexican government celebrated. American authorities celebrated. The man who supplied more drugs than anyone else in the world, by his own admission, would never supply another gram. Justice had been served. The kingpin was removed from the board. Yet his imprisonment changed nothing about the drug trade. Mexico's homicide rate increased over 20% after his January 2016 capture. 20,000 murders in 2016 alone, the highest number in decades. CJNG expanded dramatically into the vacuum left by Sinaloa's temporary disruption. The Sinaloa cartel survived under El Mayo Zambada and El Chapo's sons, Los Chapitos. They didn't just survive. They escalated fentanyl production to levels that killed tens of thousands of Americans annually. The supply of drugs into the United States didn't decrease. It increased. Night reporter Alan Foyer wrote after the trial, "In the end, Chapo is in prison now, and this time he won't be getting out." But does that change anything when it comes to the drug trade? The short answer is, it changes nothing. The same pattern is already emerging after El Mencho's death. A Journal of Conflict Resolution study found homicides increase over 30% in municipalities where kingpins are neutralized. 30%. Capturing or killing the leader doesn't end the violence, it multiplies it. Academic research consistently shows the Hydra effect. Cut off one head, and 3 more grow back. After Felix Gallardo's arrest, the Sinaloa and Tijuana cartels emerged. After Milenio cartel leaders fell, CJNG emerged. After El Chapo's capture, CJNG expanded, and the Chapitos escalated fentanyl production. After El Mayo Zambada's extraordinary capture in July 2024, kidnapped by Joaquin Guzman Lopez and flown to an El Paso airfield against his will, a Sinaloa civil war erupted. Over 2,000 murders, nearly 2,000 kidnappings. Sinaloa state became a war zone as rival factions fought for control of what El Mayo had built over 5 decades. The capture of the last old guard leader didn't bring peace. It brought chaos. David Mora of the International Crisis Group summarized the evidence from 2 decades of this strategy. Targeting top leaders has been tried repeatedly over 2 decades, and again it's been proven it doesn't work. The Mexican drug war has now lost its 2 most iconic figures in rapid succession. El Mayo Zambada, captured in July 2024. El Chapo's sons pleading guilty through 2025. El Mencho, killed in February 2026. The leadership of the 2 most powerful cartels in Mexican history has been systematically dismantled, and none of it has mattered. Mexico's impunity rate exceeds 95%. Over 130,000 people remain missing or disappeared. More than 400,000 people have been killed in homicides since the drug war's escalation in 2006, with estimates suggesting between 1/3 and 2/3 of these deaths are directly linked to organized crime. 20 years of war. Billions of dollars spent. Military operations, intelligence operations, arrests, extraditions, trials, convictions, life sentences. The ghosts and the showmen are gone. El Chapo sits in a concrete tomb in Colorado. El Mencho is buried in a golden casket in Zapopan. But the war continues. The drugs continue. The violence continues. The corruption continues. Both men proved that with enough money, enough violence, and enough corruption, you can make yourself nearly impossible to catch. El Mencho proved it better than El Chapo. But the final lesson isn't about who was harder to catch. The final lesson is that catching them doesn't matter. The infrastructure they built survives them. The demand that created them remains unchanged. The supply continues. El Chapo and El Mencho didn't create this system. They exploited it. They took poverty and corruption and violence that already existed and built empires on top of it. They proved that in a broken system, the most ruthless and disciplined can become billionaires. They proved that governments can spend decades hunting you and billions of dollars trying to catch you and still fail. And then they proved that none of it matters. El Chapo is locked in a concrete box for the rest of his life. El Mencho is dead. Both men lost everything they built. Both men are either dead or locked away forever. And the war they helped create continues without them. El Mencho was harder to catch than El Chapo. 16 years versus 13 and a half. Never captured versus captured. 3 times. Killed versus imprisoned. By every measure, El Mencho was the more successful fugitive. But success as a fugitive still ends the same way. A golden casket or a concrete cell. Freedom measured in years until the inevitable conclusion. The ghosts and the showmen are gone, but the system that created them is still running, and it will keep running until something fundamental changes. Until the demand stops. Until the corruption ends. Until the poverty is addressed. Until the war on drugs is recognized for what 2 decades of evidence has proven it to be. A failure that costs hundreds of thousands of lives and changes nothing about the supply, the demand, or the violence. El Chapo and El Mencho are finished. The drug war is not. If you enjoyed this deep dive into El Mencho versus El Chapo and who was harder to catch, make sure to subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.